which was also, of course, written in Slovak. I translated it into English, and it's dated September 1941, just after this Jewish Codex was introduced. It had 270 paragraphs restricting the life of the Jews in Slovakia. And you can see the headline here, "Last Call for the Jews. The stricter racial law against the Jews are Slovak. In certain aspects, the Jewish anti-Jewish laws are stricter than the German one." They, of course, referring to the Nuremberg law. So in other words, the Slovak government was proud what they did against their own citizens. We were Slovak citizens. But you can see the caricature here on the side, which shows a book. Jewish people are falling out and a Jew is looking up, signifying that the legal law no longer covered the Jews. So you can imagine, after a headline like this, there were little pogroms. People were being beaten up, Jewish people beaten up on the street. Their property was being damaged. Of course, they couldn't go to the police because the legal law did not cover the Jews anymore. We were ostracized from one day to another from the Slovak society. These laws that were containing the Jewish Codex, I will only mention several of them. First of all, we had to very early start from the age of 5 on the left side of our codes. We were not allowed to go to national school. We were not allowed to go to any public places like cinema, theater, swimming pool, public park. There were also silly restrictions, like we were not allowed to ride a bike or drive a car, and all kind of restriction to do with property and with money. If you had money in the bank, you were only allowed to take so much, and this amount was restricted as the time was going on, less and less, till the Jewish people became destitute, and then the government was shouting, "Look at these Jews, they are parasites, we have to look after them." They created this situation, and then they, of course, in the propaganda, they said like it was the Jewish people that didn't want to walk, but we were not allowed to walk. The Jewish people were thrown out. The businesses had to be shared with a local person, a Gentile, and then later on, when he learned how to run the business, he kicked out the Jew from the business and took it over. So the life for the Jewish people very quickly began very, very difficult. But Slovakia was very sympathetic because of Joseph Tiso. Joseph Tiso was a dictator, he was a fascist, and he was very sympathetic and cooperated with the Nazi regime in Germany. Slovakia joined the Japanese-German Axis, which meant that if Germany needed help, Slovakia helped, and of course vice versa. When the war broke out in 1939, Slovakia was very useful to Germany, because through Slovakia the Germans were able to transport the equipment, the ammunition, the heavy equipment, tanks and guns and manpower, for which the German paid, which of course helped the Slovak economy. Also, many volunteers from Slovakia volunteered to work in Germany, helped with the war effort. It is estimated that over 120,000 worked in Germany. They sent home their wages, or part of their wages, which also helped the Slovak economy, because Slovakia did not have much of an industry. And for that reason, Germany actually did not occupy Slovakia, while the rest of Europe was being occupied, like France, Belgium, Holland, and the eastern country when the war was going on. Slovakia was a partner with Germany, and therefore Slovakia was only occupied very late before in 1944. So there was great cooperation, and whatever happened in Slovakia was actually done by the Slovak government. The German wanted more volunteers to come to work and help with the war effort in Germany, and they asked Joseph Tiso to send over 20,000 more volunteers. But at the time already, the Slovak people did not like the regime in Slovakia. So when the call came up that volunteers to come forward, not many people came. They didn't listen to the government, and it was very embarrassing, of course, to Joseph Tiso that he couldn't serve his master in Berlin. But some of his extremists, right-hand extremists, they came to Tiso and said, why don't you suggest to the German that we can give them young Jewish men and women? And a delegation went to Germany, and they reached an agreement. The agreement was a unique agreement, and therefore I want to just mention a couple of paragraphs from this agreement. The first one was that the German demanded 500 mark for every Jew they will take from Slovakia. And that money was resettlement money. That's what the Germans said. They said that we will take the Jews from you, but we have to teach them some profession. We have to feed them, and we have to clothe them. And until they can do some job to earn their own upkeep, that 500 mark will cover the expense. Why do I say this particular agreement? Because it was unique. No other country in Europe ever paid the German for taking the Jews away. The only country was Slovakia. The second paragraph, which was very important, was that the German demanded any Jew taken from Slovakia has to be stripped of his or her citizenship. This was very important for the German, because it meant once the Jewish people crossed the border from Slovakia to Poland or to Germany, the Slovak government had no jurisdiction what will happen to these people. Of course, today we know what happened to them. The deportation started in 1942, in March 1942. The first transport, in fact, was 1,000 women between the ages 16 and 36, not married. That was very important. That was the first transport that left Slovakia. But at the time we didn't know anything. We didn't even know that they left Slovakia. It was only later on that we discovered. The deportation started, and it went unabated from March 1942 till October 1942. During this period, 52 transports left Slovakia, each transport between 1,000 and 1,500 Jews. Altogether, 58,000 Jews were deported out of a population of about 85 to 90,000 Jews that lived in Slovakia. During this time, many of my cousins, aunt, uncle, my grandparents from my father were taken away. I remember we said to them goodbye and said, when all this is finished, we will be reunited and everything would be all right. We did not realize that it was for the last time we saw them. We didn't even cry when we said goodbye. My grandparents were taken in July 1942, and my father and mother were very sad, and we stood there and we just said, don't worry, when this is all over, we will be reunited. But unfortunately, we never saw them again. At the time, only Jews that were not useful to the Slovak economy were taken. These were small shopkeepers, government employees, men that were discharged from the Slovak army. So, because my father was a farmer, he was considered useful to the Slovak economy, and therefore we were not taken away. We had this little document that for the time being we shouldn't be taken away. And every month my father had to go to this small clerk in the neighboring town that he had to get extension, always another month. And I went with my father as well. I remember the official would have the paper and he would just read here, Mr. Reichental, and just reading till my father gave him the brown envelope. That was the whole trick, that he was going into detail, just waiting for some bribe. And this how these small clerks, they actually, many of them become quite rich out of the money that Jewish people were giving them to extend these little documents. Because as the time was going on, we began to realize what was happening to the Jews, and therefore the deportation also stopped in October. Now there were several reasons, but I just want to mention very shortly. There were two major reasons. One was that the Jewish leadership eventually got together some people and began to sort of organize the Jewish people, but it was of course too late. By the time already 3/4 of the Jewish people were taken away. And according to the statistic, out of the 58,000 Jews that were taken away, only between 280 and 500 survived. The rest of them all were murdered in Auschwitz, Birkenau, and in different Lublin and other extermination camps in Poland. But when the Jewish leadership realized what was happening, they collected a lot of money. Also, they got some money from abroad, and I'm talking a lot of money, even in our money today. When we're talking at the time, that money, it was a lot of money. They bribed these officials that organized these transport. They were practically giving the Jews to the German, and then the German murdered them. And they began to bribe them to stop it, because what was happening. The Vatican was pressing Joseph Tiso to stop the deportation, because he was being told, you citizens are being murdered, you have to stop it. And from the beginning he wouldn't listen to them, he wouldn't answer any letter, he wouldn't receive a delegation from the Vatican. But eventually, obviously, he relented, and the deportation stopped in October 1942. At the time, they were still being arrested. The Jews were still being arrested, but not deported. They were arrested and brought to camps in Slovakia. And in this camp, they set up several industries to employ these Jewish people. They were tailoring, of course, because many Jewish people, they were tailored, and they did the uniform for the Slovak army. They were printing places where they printed all the propaganda leaflets and forms and things for the government. There was even a factory to manufacture toys, which the Slovak, very famous, they do them from wood. I saw many here in the toy shop, tractors and lorries and cars. They're from wood for children. So there was a whole industry going, and eventually even the Jewish leadership was telling the Jews, you know, it's good thing, go to this camp, and at least the Slovak will see that we are useful to the economy, and there will be no interest to deport us. But of course, many Jewish people didn't believe this. They thought it's only a trick to bring the Jews in these camps, and when they begin to do the deportation again, they will have them in one place and they won't need to look for them. So we didn't want to be arrested. I remember many times some of the local people were helping us, because, as I said, the Slovak people hated the fascist regime, and when the police was in the neighboring village looking for Jewish people, we would get a message to lock the house and go to the cornfield or somewhere to hide, because they are on the way and they might arrest us. So we would lock the house and go to this cornfield, and we would stay there for the day till the police left the village, and then we would be told that we can come out. Some other time we had in a barn in the farm, we had a place where we dried the corn in the attic. We had a place there with blanket, with water, with a little food, and when they were near, we couldn't go to the field, we would go to the barn, go on the ladder into the attic, then we pulled the ladder up, and very quiet, we stayed there till the night, till the police left. Even our employees did not know that we were hiding there. But also sometimes we were told that in the night there is a project to go during the night to take the Jews. And then we would sleep in the houses of our employees. And it was very heroic of them to take us in, because if they were found out that they were hiding Jews, they would have been very severely punished. So this was going on for 2 years, and it was sort of a hide and seek with the police. Every time we would, every couple of days or weeks, we would hear that this is going on, and we would had to hide when the police came. But it was a very serious event, because if you were caught, you never knew what is going to happen to you. So this was going all this time for 2 years, up to 28th of August 1944, when in Slovakia a rebellion began. In other words, the Slovak people rebelled against the Tiso regime, because it was a dictatorial regime. the Slovak people suffered under the regime. Anybody that didn't belong to the party was discriminated, or anybody spread any rumor against the government was arrested, sometime never seen again. So this was a very serious uprising. Many soldiers from the army defected and joined the rebellion. Police defected, joined the rebellion. So Tiso had no power to suppress this uprising, and therefore for the first time the German army occupied Slovakia, not because they wanted to occupy Slovakia, but because they wanted to save the Tiso regime, which was a friendly regime to the German. They of course succeeded. Within 2 to 3 weeks the uprising was suppressed. It is estimated that over 15,000 young Slovak men and women died in this uprising. But the resistance still continued. Many men ended up in the forest as partisans, and they would fight the German by doing sabotage work, blowing up bridges and railway line to slow the German army. Unfortunately, with the German army, also units of Adolf Eichmann came to Slovakia. Adolf Eichmann was, of course, the man that deported the Jews to the extermination camp. And his army was the Gestapo, the German secret police. So many of them came to Slovakia. They joined the Hlinka Guard, which was the Slovak police persecuting the Jews, and two of them together became very efficient. They put spies in villages and towns to spy on the remaining 25 to 35,000 Jews that still were in Slovakia, and also spying on the people that joined the rebellion. So they were all over the place. And therefore, we knew that the deportation will start again. And we realized that if we stay in the village, even though we had a lot of friends, it would only be a matter of time that somebody will betray us. So we decided to leave the village. Of course, my father couldn't leave. He had to look after the livestock, after the field. So it was my mother, my brother, and myself. We were leaving the village and going to live in another village, pretending that we were Gentile. The person that helped us to do this, because with a name like Reichental, we wouldn't have got very far. Reichental is a German name. And you had the police at every crossroad, every train station.